Good afternoon. Welcome to Hudson River's Computing webinar for the fifth of a 7 of criteria for selecting an ERP system. In this case, we're looking at adaptability. Here we go. And so today our agenda is to basically introduce who Hudson River Computing is, who I am, who we are, what do we do, what are the 7 important criteria that people need to review before they purchase an accounting system. And in today's deep dive, what we're going to talk about is the adaptability of the system. Okay, if you have interest, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then last but not least, we have a short Q&A session at the end. So let's get started. So Hudson River Computing was founded in 1993, and we concentrated on accounting systems back then. Eventually they became to be more fulfilled as far as functionality, so they became ERP systems. Part of the reason we started the organization way back when was that we found companies, as we looked at it, we could find companies that could support the accounting part of the software. And because things were still technical and keeping things running from a technical standpoint, we could find companies that could make the software run. However, we couldn't find both. We had a lot of difficulties. So we started Hudson River Computing because we had a technical knowledge of both sides of it. So basically we have the ability to do the accounting, we have accounting degrees, and et cetera along the way. We have corporate accounting experience. And then last but not least, we also have that technical experience where we've worked with databases and networking and all those kind of things. Over time, we have gathered up a staff that's, has an ability to do a lot of different work for us, helping with the accounting side, ERP, et cetera. Even though we don't get into the technical side, we don't support networks directly and all that. We do that strictly from a technical side of supporting our products that we carry. We have focused on the ERP products, and we've kind of done that successfully for almost 30 years now. So it's kind of an important piece. We're committed to quality products. And that's part of what we choose. We're very careful about what products we pick as we go through, and because we're sitting across the table from you, and it's kind of important. And we have, a small group of people, but we have, great experience and wide range of capabilities. So the nice part about it is we're capable enough to help you out with your implementation, but we're also small enough where you can actually contact the people that you need. You're not just a number to us. It's very important to us. We actually carry 2 different products. We carry Acumatica, which we picked up in 2015. So we've been a product reseller for that for about 6 years now. It's a great product. We also carry Microsoft Dynamics GP, and we've been a partner for Dynamics GP since 1992 of November. So to give you an idea, we've worked with both products for a while now, and that experience kind of excels. Altogether, we've done about 380 implementations of ERP products. So what are the 7 important criteria? In this case here, we're looking at, technology. We covered these in prior sessions. So 1 through 4 have already been covered. You can go check our website for that and the link, and basically get an idea what we're talking about. Technology is important as to, how well does the product work, in the sense that if it's, based on current standard products, is it, basically, can they improve the product over time? Meaning from a technological standpoint, can they easily adapt to changes in technology? Those kind of things are important pieces. Functionality, technology is important, but if the product doesn't do anything you want it to do, functionality is a problem. So the bottom line is you have to have a product that has a lot of functionality built in. Integration. Most companies have some sort of an integration. It could be as simple as, hey, we get a year-end journal entry from our accounting firm, to, hey, we have a daily or an hourly or a completely integrated system that basically is integrated continually for different systems. So it's a scenario where, depending on your industry, sometimes that makes a lot of sense to have that integration. And the key to that is having, for an ERP system, if you need that, to have the integration capability available, and multiple versions of that. Reliability. If the system is not based on a reliable platform and is not, well tested in the marketplace, meaning it has a significant number of implementations, that can be kind of a crucial part. You don't want to be the guinea pig for the product. You don't want to be the beta tester. You want the system to be well tested. So it's kind of an important piece to that. So today we're going to talk about adaptability. And what adaptability is, do they have the ability to change as your company either changes or to meet current requirements? But the idea of it is to have that flexibility for the long term. And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth on that today. Last but not, we also have vendor support, which is important, not just from, the vendor itself, but you need to have a reliable and somebody you can work with very well as a reseller to help you implement that. Keep in mind, we've done a lot of implementations. The typical accounting person and or CPA in a corporate environment has done a total of maybe 2 or 3 implementations in their entire careers. We've done over 380, so it gives a lot of experience of things to do and not do along the way. And it's a continual learning experience, but the idea of it is that becomes important. And then the ongoing support for the product, because we know your implementation. Last but not least, we have the value of the product. It's not necessarily how much you pay for the product, it's what you get for the product that you pay for, and what can it do for your organization. So we'll come back to those in later webinars to kind of fill that in. Let's go a little bit further. Let's talk about the adaptability timeline. And I've done this in each of the sessions because it's changed, and it's been remarkable that how much of a change we've seen. I'm not going back into the 60s and all that. We're going to start in 1980, when it was prevalent for small and medium businesses to start looking and thinking about implementing a computerized system for a lot of their business processes. So in the case of the 1980s, and you take a look at 1980 to 1988, you have really minis and mainframes that were there for processing systems, ERP systems, and or accounting systems, depending upon the depth of the system. They tended to be on the minis and mainframes, which were fairly expensive. Okay, you're typically looking at IBM and Wang and those kind of things, where you could literally spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on hardware. The systems tended to be customized, meaning that many times you had your own computer programming staff, because you needed to have them there to be able to either customize functionality as you needed it, but also to maintain it as it went on. So for example, if they came out with a mainframe operating system upgrade, did you have to make changes to your code? Or hey, you have a new usage or different change in the business, or hey, the government changed the way they did taxes. So the answer comes down to you had your own programmers on staff to do the code, because there weren't that many places to actually just buy software at that time. So that became expensive and timely. So not only was it expensive, but it also, many times when you required the upgrading, like when we talked about the operating system update, many times it required recoding all the customizations again, meaning, or just recoding and retesting. So it could be, a 6-month process in order to get an upgrade to go, assuming it was relatively contained. It could even be longer than that in some cases back in the day. You then went into the 88 and then 1985, and you started to have PC-based tech systems, okay? Meaning that, they weren't graphical yet, but they were basically PC-based. They were much less expensive, which was important. The customization and tailoring was limited, but on the other hand, for the first time, many of these small and medium businesses were able to actually computerize and or automate some of their processes. So even just taking and automating things like the general ledger, which today we take for granted in an ERP system, was relatively difficult and relatively new at that time. People many times were still using manual ledgers. So it's our first foray into that. So the customization wasn't as critical for certain pieces of that, because you gained a lot just from the automation in general terms. Printing a financial report took a lot less time that way than compiling it either through a series of spreadsheets or even through paper documents in some cases. The other part of it is, even when their customization was available, okay, which was not as frequent as you'd like to think, many times the upgrading, again, was very similar to some of the mainframe, not necessarily quite as expensive, but it was much more involved still. It wasn't like it would just automatically upgrade for you as you went on, all right? From 1995 to 2013, we started getting into the graphical PC-based ones. Well, the availability for the customization became easier. Okay, the tailoring of the system became easier, and that depended a little bit on the technology and the product, but there was a lot more functionality and capability to be able to do that. Over time, what's happened is the upgrades became easier and less costly as well. So it became much more cost efficient to tailor the system or customize the system to your absolute detail that you actually need. At the same time, the graphical-based systems actually included a lot more functionality than they did at the beginning of the time frame. So if you go back from a system from 1995 where it basically did accounting for you, where it did AR, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and general ledger, maybe some bank rec or some odds and ends, what you find now is the graphical systems by 2013, we're doing a lot more of those pieces for you in your organization. Might be doing some of the manufacturing, tracking, inventory, and those kind of things. So it's actually kind of broadened out functionality-wise. So what's happened since then? Okay, well, as the cloud became prevalent for various pieces of software, it's also become prevalent for the ERP products. And with that, with the best cloud products, a lot of the customization and tailoring that historically was done by programmers can be done by end users now. You need to add a field to a window, for example, you could actually have somebody actually add that field. Now, obviously, you're not going to give security for just anybody to do that, because it needs to be planned still, needs to be thought out, and those kind of things. The idea of it is you can customize it to be able to do what you need to do. Now, you can still have full-fledged customization if you have a complex requirement that's unique to your organization. The answer is you can still do that. And the difference is that it is upgradable and cost effective, much more so than it had been in the past. Part of that has to do with the design of the products. Part of it has to do with the technology built into the products as well. So what's different about the adaptability in the cloud environments? Okay. If you pick the right ERP product, okay, the one thing to keep in mind is the average product is used for 13 years. So the product absolutely needs to be adaptable, meaning that if you think back to what you were doing 13 years ago compared to today, for example, we take Bluetooth in our cars for granted, or maybe CarPlay or Android Auto and connecting up for our maps or for navigation. And the answer is 13 years ago, you spent $2,000 or $3,000 for navigation in a vehicle, and it still was just okay. Okay, so we'll put quotes on that. And so things we take for granted, and even 13 years ago, you typically got a CD player in your car still. And I don't know, my vehicle didn't come with a CD player anymore because it doesn't need to. It can either pull music from my phone, from the internet as I'm driving, et cetera, and that's all changed. So by the same token, your accounting software has to be able to adapt and change over time with you. What makes that happen? Okay, part of it comes down to is many items that require customization now are just configuration. You can add fields to the windows, you can actually add attributes and things like that, that before were actual customization pieces that need to be compiled and everything. Now it's kind of like, hey, I need a field to track, and you can actually just add it. Now that being said, again, recommend you secure it so it's just not willy-nilly, so you don't end up with 3 fields doing the same thing. But the idea, you have to come up with a plan. But the idea doesn't necessarily require a programmer anymore. It can many times be done by the end user. It becomes an important factor for the time frame as being able to adapt and change as your organization and your requirements change, as well, or grow, as well as the scenario of being able to manage it on an ongoing basis and upgradability. Customization still requires, if you're doing full out customization, say you have a unique industry requirement, there are times that does still occur. Okay, it's less so than it used to be, but you might have a starting point that's a little closer to what you would have in the past as far as needing less customization, but it still requires some customization, requires more expertise. With that expertise, it's relatively key to make sure that the platform that you pick for your ERP product, that your ERP product is using, is a fairly standardized platform. Does it use like C# or something like that that is readily available, or is a proprietary system that is done strictly for that particular product? Okay, that being said, when customization is required, the product is important because of this. It becomes a scenario where the technology is critical, make sure there's available resources. There's quite a few C# programmers out there, but try to pick something that is proprietary. Like I've worked with Dynamics for a long time, and we have dexterity in that product. And there's a handful of people to program in that around the world in a percentage basis. So the C# people are easier to find. Secondarily, the design of the product becomes critical. And what that happens is that can more affect the upgradability of the product than the actual technology that's used in certain respects, in the sense that if the product is designed right and it's object oriented, everything becomes an object. So what you see on the screen is actually stored in the database, and then the code places it on the screen, for example, or on the report, or controls the different processes that it goes through for the automation for like posting invoices and things. So in that key, the way that product is designed is critical as to the upgradability of the product. So if everything is basically stored in the database, it becomes much more upgradable, okay, than if you don't do that. So if you don't do that, and they have kind of the old-fashioned database design, the technology doesn't change that upgradability. The design of the product is what changes that upgradability. And the best products today are very upgradable. They require a minimal amount of testing and things like that as you do the upgrades, and they're upgrading more frequently. Historically, if we take a look at the last round, okay, from up to 2013, typically those products upgraded every 18 months on average. Sometimes it was every year, sometimes every 18 months, sometimes every 2 years, but generally around 18 months was the average. The products today typically have major upgrades every twice a year. So it's a continual cycle. They're getting things out faster to us, so that upgradability of the product is important, not only from the standpoint of what the vendor can provide you in the cloud, but also from the standpoint if you've tailored the system or customized the system to your liking, is it upgradable? And those become important factors as you go through it. Reporting is a critical factor. A lot of systems do great at collecting the data, but they don't do very well at presenting the data or creating dashboards and key performance indicators. So the idea of it is, the key to it is, can the system get that information out to you? That will make the system much more adaptable to you. So if it's easy to query the information, or it's easy to access the information or report the information, that becomes critical in the factors of adaptability, almost more so than adding a field sometimes, because sometimes it's how you report and get it to the people that need it, and that becomes important. And then last but not least, is the system future-proofed? I mentioned at the beginning of the slide that the average system is in use for 13 years. Sometimes it's more than that. Okay, I've seen systems in use for 20 or 22 years with our GP clients, for example. Great system, working well. The key to it is the adaptability, not only in the sense of how you set things up in the beginning. Gee, I left out proper spacing in, my chart of accounts and those kind of things, which are critical, but also that the technology has survived well over a period of time. And those factors become important. So how do companies future-proof now? Well, we're an Acumatica reseller, so I'm going to show you an Acumatica slide because it's kind of the easiest way to show you, because they have a good slide for this. They've compartmentalized a lot of the pieces of their product. So if they decide, hey, you know what? We're using Microsoft SQL Server now and MySQL, but you know what? Oracle's a better database for what we want to do in the future. They could literally take that connectors pieces out, that container out, and put in an Oracle one, and it would work. Okay, and the nice part about it is that all they have to do is to develop their hooks. They wouldn't have to redevelop all their code, for example, for doing a general ledger entry. It's just really pulled in and put back in. By the same token, on the right-hand side in the bottom, you'll see where you have the HTML5. When they went through that, they literally just pulled it out, and in one update, we were HTML5. They didn't have to recode the general ledger. We didn't have any functionality issues or problems because they recoded. It was just literally the hooks came out and went back in. And those kind of pieces become very important. And they've done that throughout the product, which helps future-proof the platform for that longevity that we're all kind of expecting, and making it adaptable from a technology standpoint. And those become important factors, because if that core isn't there, then the answer is you end up with an outdated product over time. Right? You might start with the most up-to-date product today, but if you think back, like the car example, it really does take a while to do that, and these systems do take and last a long time for us. And if you pick the right system, these are great systems in many cases. So to kind of give you a quick one I'm going to kind of focus on here, we can say Acumatica, et cetera, best cloud, et cetera. The biggest one I'm actually looking here is the Cody Awards, and for today. And you want to pick a system that's won different awards for usability and things. Those are all important factors, and Acumatica does very well in those. But one of them is in the Cody Awards. That's important because it's an industry recognized sanctioned event, so to speak, where you can say, okay, the code that the system is based on actually won an award because it is flexible and actually will work well, and it has a great environment for you to develop in. Okay, so if you actually have to develop. So the idea of it is there's not many of these products that are in the ERP marketplace that actually win these awards. And there are actually products out there that are based on the Acumatica platform that aren't Acumatica at all. And so they've actually developed from their code base to develop other systems to do other processes that don't even relate to accounting. So the idea of it is that code base becomes important for that longevity. And the way they've done it, a lot of other organizations have looked at that and said, yep, that's the key I want to be in. Now, the core is basically still C#, but the way they develop the environment to develop those pieces in saves a lot of time for the development environment with a lot of flexibility. So let's kind of update and kind of wrap up today. I'm not trying to take a lot of your time. I'm trying to do these as fairly quick presentations so people don't fall asleep, et cetera. But the adaptability, we're just going to summarize real quick, okay? The adaptability ensures that the system will work for your unique requirements. Many times that'll be out of the box now, but if it's not, does it have the ability to get there? We talked a little bit about configuration versus customization. Hey, can I configure these pieces? Can I add an attribute to a window, for example, versus customization? I need to actually program a whole module because I do X. Okay, those are very different scenarios. Okay. The newer systems have that flexibility for both, and a lot of times the configuration will get you there without having to do customization, which is kind of the point. They have more functionality as core, but then on top of that, they give you more capability beyond the core functionality before you start getting into customization. The other part is it's important to know that the systems will be able to adapt okay, and keep up to date with technology over a long span of time. We're going to use these systems for a long time, typically. We're not looking at saying, hey, we're going to use this for a year and then move on. We're typically looking at an average of 13 years. And again, that's the average. There are many more that use it less. There are many more that use it more than that. There are some that use it less. But the idea is 13 is quite a while. Okay, if you think about that for a second, it's roughly a quarter of somebody's entire career that they'd be using the same system. So the idea is it becomes very important to keep in mind that the adaptability of that system over long term for the changes, even from the system of flexibility and how you configure the system to, hey, they can have the ability to update the system, becomes important over a period of time. Use of standard environments. Okay, basically I came back to that and say, hey, the C# programmers, there's a bunch of them out there. Use something that's proprietary. There might be only 2,000 in the whole world. Doesn't sound bad until you're looking for one of those 2,000 people. Okay, so the idea of it is it's important to have that kind of standardized environment. The product and the database design, does it have a good set of functionality to begin with? Is it flexible? Can the users configure certain pieces on their own? And the database design, is it object-oriented? Does it allow you to do that? Those become important factors. And last but not least, is it future-proof? And I can't stress this enough, not only from the standpoint of the flexibility and the functionality, can I expand my chart of accounts by a digit, those kind of things, to, hey, I need to program a whole module because we picked up a whole business unit. It's just totally new to us and we need to change. Or there's different things that change over time from a government regulation. Okay, so in this past year we had a change in the 1099. Is it something where they released an update? In this case they did, but is it something that took them a long time? No, the answer is it was plenty of time for us to worry about it. We didn't have to think about it too hard. We just had to make sure that the data was right, which becomes important. So the idea is that long-term longevity of the product becomes important. So that's kind of our key. That's what we're trying to look at. That's what we're trying to take care of today. So I'm going to take a few questions and we'll kind of go from there.